to this week's Fireside Chat with Jesse. I am joined today by Joe Leonard, CEO of Oakmont Capital Services. Thanks for joining me, Joe.
Thank you, Jesse. It's good to see you on camera rather than in person like we normally do.
Yeah,
in an airport.
In an airport, at a Marriott up in Phoenix.
Correct.
I think that was 2 weeks ago.
Barely 2 weeks ago.
And I'm sure we'll be tired of each other because I think before we hit record, we're going to be at 4 conferences with each other over the next 2 weeks.
It's a very active season for the equipment finance world, isn't it?
And I want to say Darren was the third one of these that I did when I started these in 2020. So we'll have to have a little competition in regards to, does Pennsylvania get more views than Minnesota?
Oh, Pennsylvania will definitely get more views, but I have to say that Darren did outclass me by having the fireplace in the background. So
the obnoxious fireplace that showed up the Fireside. I'm like, come on.
It looks like Spencer had a real fireplace on his. So I got to give those folks from Minnesota credit, but at the same time, although you can't tell, behind me, it is a balmy 55 degrees here in southeastern Pennsylvania. So fireplace wouldn't really be appropriate.
How's it warmer in Pennsylvania than it is out here in Arizona? That's what I want to know.
It was like that 2 weeks ago too. It's an anomaly. So we'll let the weather folks deal with that, but we're certainly enjoying it while we can.
No, that's fantastic, Joe. So for those people who might not be familiar with yourself, do you mind just kind of discussing your career to date in equipment finance?
Of course, as many of us in this industry are, we accidentally found ourselves in equipment finance without necessarily trying. My story started as working for a auto leasing company that specialized in corporate auto leasing, and we had a division which was basically one salesperson who was doing equipment financing. And he decided one day to go out to lunch and have a liquid lunch, which our teetotaling boss, well, back then in the 80s, it wasn't looked upon maybe as favorably by our employer, and found himself out of a job that afternoon with several contracts that were in flux. And I literally was grabbed by the shirt collar into that office and said, "You're now in equipment leasing." And kind of trial by fire, learned it quickly because I kind of had to, did very well with it. This was back in the day, right after ITC expired, and there was a lot of folks that were still heavily involved in equipment leasing, and the rates were ridiculous. We're talking in the 20s for A credits. But there was a lot of demand, and did very well. Left the industry for a while, but as a lot of folks will say, the equipment finance industry is like the Hotel California. So I got dragged back into it. Probably about 10 years later, after I had involved in other businesses throughout the country. So, and then from there, we kind of took off. So I've been full-time in this industry since 1998, and we actually celebrate Oakmont Capital's 25th anniversary this year.
Congratulations. I like that analogy, the Hotel California, because I'm a forever equipment finance person. However, if a liquid lunch is now frowned upon, then I might get myself in trouble.
It was the 1980s, late 1980s. So I think everything kind of circles back. So who knows if it is or it isn't currently, but yeah, his loss was the equipment finance industry's gain. So I jumped in, and the rest is kind of history.
That's fair. That's perfectly fair. And so let's talk about Oakmont Capital Services, if you don't mind. I want to say I was probably at your Pennsylvania office. I mean, God, it was probably almost 10 years ago. So that's where you and I met, and I'm sure we met at some conferences before then.
Yeah, it was a very rainy night. I remember we went to a restaurant that was close to the Brandywine battlefield. I remember we were all concerned about whether or not we could get out of the parking lot. So while we do have this nice balmy weather, like I referenced, sometimes we do get the torrential downpours. But I'm glad everybody made it out safe that evening. Oakmont, like I said, we've been around for 25 years. We are a small ticket lender. Our meteoric growth really started in 2018. We have been preparing for a big growth spurt, but we just didn't know what that opportunity may be. So we had the opportunity to do a lift out of the folks from Stearns Bank Equipment Finance Group. That was completed on June 4th of 2018. And from there, we opened up an office in Albany, Minnesota, which we've outgrown twice already. We just relocated into a much larger office, in the same town of Albany, where we can, have 80 plus people at that location. We don't have it filled yet, but we certainly will probably in the very near future. We specialize in C&I assets. I wouldn't call us a generalist. We kind of stick to our knitting where we can. Try not to deviate too much from that. And a lot of what we do comes from the OEM and the vendor channel. As you mentioned, we have the location in Pennsylvania. We are in our third location here in Pennsylvania as well, but it took us a little bit longer to get to where we are. If you can see behind me, the cars on the road, that's Route 202. And just a few minutes up the road is Rob Boyer's location. A few minutes further past that is DLL. And this was the town that we're in is also the home to where Leaf got their start. So it's kind of a hotbed of activity on this, particularly this Route 202 corridor. A lot of finance companies are located close to this road or on this road like we are. And from a standpoint of that big news back in June of 2018, we really become kind of an employee-centric company. We have very low attrition. We hope to, knock on wood, we hope to keep it that way. And as I'm sure a lot of the viewers, have seen our name around, I'm trying to take the Brad Peterson, everything gets branded. So you're going to see us, somewhere along the way. So there's always an Oakmont logo on a Jeep or on a.
Yeah, I was going to say, when there's some truck in the Albany parking lot I saw one time with OC.
Yeah, you do. We have another one here, and unfortunately, a couple of our salespeople have it at a trade show this week, or else I would have it parked outside the window and getting some free publicity that way. But not happening today. It's actually doing its intended work. So but yeah, we're out there. We try to promote a good culture. We try to do good by our communities, and that's been successful. And I'm sure that anyone who sees us out there on social media can see that it's not always about we finance this piece of equipment or we hired this person. And there's a lot of this is something we sponsored, or we're planting trees, or we're doing charity walks, whatever. We try to be very active and cognizant of what we can do to help not just our employees but the community as well.
No, thank you for that overview, Joe. I think I was up in Minnesota 3 weeks ago. So I was at the temporary location with the other temporary location behind it.
Yes,
and
yeah.
Then Darren drove me by the new location, which is
the new location.
It looks fantastic. It wasn't quite ready 3 weeks ago, but yeah, I mean, that growth's amazing.
It is, and as you know, there's not a lot of places to grow within that town. So we had to build our own building just to make it happen.
No, it's fantastic. And I don't know if you knew this, but Darren was like my third ever equipment finance customer that I got in 2007.
Interesting. No,
when he was at Stern. So that's how far, and that's the team that you now have there were all those people that were there. So you definitely have a good group. I mean,
what I'm hearing, Jeff, is that Darren comes in third a lot. He was your third interview for this. He was your third customer ever. I'm gonna have to remember that Darren comes in third a lot.
Maybe we'll have to make a little poster of that too.
Yeah, a little something on the bottom of the screen.
That's fantastic. I'm sure Kira could have some real fun with that as well from a marketing.
I'm sure she could. I would have some fun with it too. So,
and she's awesome, by the way. She is helping out our Equipment Finance Cares marketing committee. She is just amazing, which I'm sure you already know.
Very, very talented, and we're happy to have her on board. She's been here for a while, and she's helped out a lot of the associations, including yours and the CLFP Foundation, and it's kind of what we're about and what she's about. So we're that kind of is a testament to how we operate.
So with this Albany contingent or Albany, Minnesota contingent and Philadelphia, like, New York, Philadelphia, we don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, especially sports related. We'll leave that there. But, how's that rivalry between both? I mean, especially from a culture perspective, right? Because that was 2018. You guys had a solid almost 2 years, well, almost 2 years before the pandemic hit, which I'm sure was. But how is that going as you continue to add employees and keeping the culture cohesive?
It goes very well, and so obviously from the standpoint of the different cultures, and you have the benefit of being in both locations or seeing both locations, and the East Coast, major city on the East Coast is very different than Central Minnesota, but each team has embraced the other. We travel back and forth with employees, or the employees travel on their own relatively frequently. So you have a lot of in-person interaction, and of course, we've all adapted to the Zoom world, so to speak. So every day there's interaction, there's engagement, there's sharing of ideas, there's collaboration, and you just work it through the technology, or you work it in person. But we make it a point to try to get all of our employees that are willing and able to travel will go to one location or the other, and spend some time. So it's really interesting in that the folks in Pennsylvania generally only like to do it in the warmer months. I guess there's something there, but and then from the rivalry, yes, there is sports rivalry in between us and wagers and all sorts of things. My favorite was we were able to get into their TV system within the office and broadcast the 2018 NFC Championship game recently. So I'm sure there's a payback coming as a result of that, but we have not experienced it yet.
Unfortunately, I think unless you're New Orleans, I really don't know what they got on you.
That's a scab that I think that I don't want to pick with them, and I'm on the Minnesota side there. So
no, it's perfectly fair. There was a time there where I think their kicker just cost them so many games. It's like you don't even want to send a text at that point in time.
No,
you just feel bad because I'm a Giants fan, Joe. I think Philadelphia has beat us 20 times in a row. What can I really say about football?
It might not be that many, but it's certainly quite a few. But you're Giants will come back around. So we're actually love the Mets because we know your Mets are going to fall apart in September. So it does.
Hey, no hard feelings there. I'm a Blue Jays fan. So
all right, fair enough.
Go Phillies.
We appreciate that.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So, throughout the pandemic, was your office open the entire time? Like, what is your current? Were employees always in the office, or did you have more of a hybrid model, or where things at today?
So we do utilize the hybrid model currently, and but the office is open 5 days a week for those that want to be here. Through the pandemic, it was kind of interesting. In Minnesota, there was a mandatory shutdown, but in Pennsylvania we were deemed business essential. So we had a skeleton crew here in the office, and I was in every day, and I traveled as many of us did the week before the country was shut down. I was out in Las Vegas at the Connex show, and as I'm sure you probably were as well. And this will be the first year back after the 3 years that event was typically on hiatus. And I was traveling as quickly as early June of 2020. So we did not, sadly, as bad as the pandemic was, it did not have an effect on Oakmont Capital. If anything, we ended up having one of our best years ever. I think that's true with a lot of our peers in the industry, that 2020 was not a bad origination year whatsoever. But we did have the differences of Pennsylvania was open, Minnesota was not. As soon as Minnesota could open, they were back at the office, but we had actually moved offices during the pandemic. So it was a very interesting time period. But we didn't skip a beat. And we're very proud of how we handled the pandemic. What was very interesting is, here in the Northeast, we felt the effects of Hurricane Sandy when that caused a lot of issues in the greater New Jersey area. Where we're located, we didn't really have too many issues other than power outages due to the high winds, but that resulted in our server, crashing. And, we decided at that point, rather than, rely upon a server, we embraced technology and we went to the cloud and we went to voice over IP phones. So all of our employees had laptops, shortly after Hurricane Sandy, all new employees got laptops. Everyone had voice over IP phones, and as soon as the apps were available to work on your cell phone. So when the shutdown occurred and we sent employees home, we didn't skip a beat. We only had 2 issues with employees who had less than ideal internet service. Other than that, everybody it was just another day in the office. At your office, you could wear your slippers and you had your dog or cat next to you. So,
and now maybe there's a little bit more compassion when the doorbell rings when you're on a Zoom.
Well, funny is that the slippers theme is maintained as many of our employees, it's like Mr. Rogers' neighborhood in here. They come in wearing their street shoes and they put on slippers, or flip-flops in some cases. So it's so we let that one slide, as long as we don't have company coming in.
I said business casual. What does that mean for footwear?
Yeah, we did make the flip-flop something where we are flip-flops in season only. So.
Or do you have to wear socks?
Yeah, you can ask Jim Peach about that.
Fantastic. So what are you seeing now in 2023? Because I don't know how many people I talk to on a regular basis, but people are like, oh, we're concerned. We see this here. I mean, you were at the Orion event. I mean, there's obviously, it was almost like last year at the executive roundtable. You're like, God, that was kind of a buzzkill.
Yeah.
And then it's Orion event. You're kind of like, oh God, is this still coming or what's going on? And then when you talk to a lot of people, like, no, we're having good originations. Q1's looking great. And it's kind of like, what's going on here?
Well, I'll bring it a little bit more recent than the Orion event, which was a very great event. Listening to some of the speakers. Just earlier this week, I was at an event with the Secured Finance Network out of Las Vegas, SF Vegas, and attended several sessions. Had a whole bunch of individual meetings with investment bankers, private equity folks, you name it, attorneys, and my CFO and I were leaving on Tuesday, and in the Uber to the airport, I looked over and I said, how many times did you hear the word recession? And he looked at me with a confused face and he goes, I don't think I heard it at all. And I said, no, we heard it twice in the opening remarks. And then in one of the keynote speakers, we heard them mention the recession word, or the R word, but they never, it was more of a cursory, I have to mention this because it's in the press, but it was never an underlying theme in any of the conversations we had. We are certainly experiencing, unprecedented growth. Our volume continues to increase from where it was in 2022. Our application flow is maintained where it was in December, which is typically a busy month within our industry. We haven't seen much deterioration in application flow. Part of it does have to do with the weather. As I said, we're here in the East Coast, so the warmer than average temperatures are probably stealing some business we would have in late March and moving it into what we experienced in February. But that wouldn't have explained January, which was a very active month. I think that I'm concerned because the Fed is using trailing data to make their decisions. And we're coming out of a pandemic. We're coming out of just a crazy amount of stimulus that was put out by the federal government. Some need it, some not need it. And these are data points, and the reaction by the consumer there are no data points for. So the concern is that they overcorrect, and that they're using the trailing data that's being used to make these decisions is too trailing. We all work and live in a very fast-paced environment where, you can get economic data, on your phone, any time of day or night. And I'm hoping that the Fed is maybe going around their mandate a little bit as to what data they are supposed to use, and looking at some things more real time. Right now, it would appear as though we're in for a very soft landing. There has to be some effect that we'll see. It may be isolated to certain geographic areas. It might be certain industries are affected more than others. Obviously, tech is clearly being affected by it, but we'll have to see how that translates. I mean, employment is softening a little bit, but certainly, if you want a job, you're going to find a job right now.
Sure. I mean, and out here, there's so much construction going around. Thankfully, you can't hear what's next to me, but you just see it keep going and going, and that's where I'm kind of like, is it a talking? It seems like it's just a talking point, right? Where you have to be cautiously optimistic, right? Or you're like, okay, we have to mention it because it's everywhere.
It is, and you're right. It's you travel, I travel, and we always are looking out at the skyline when we're in a major city to see how many cranes there are. I believe it was last year's NIFA event in Nashville in the fall. I counted 13 building cranes on my side of the hotel.
That's absolutely insane. That's awesome. So I want to switch to kind of like the trade associations, because I'm assuming that's probably how we first met at one of these conferences. I know that Oakmont always shows up strong when it comes to all of these networking events. So kind of like between NIFA and ELFA, what do those trade associations mean to you guys, Joe?
Oh, well, they mean everything. And obviously we do show up strong at both associations because we get so much out of those associations. We're a long-term NIFA member. I may have missed the first year of when NIFA started, but I ended with the old EAEL and UAEL. The last conferences that they had, I was in attendance, and we used to do the what was it, the November event for NIFA. Used to be EAL, up in New Jersey. TNAC, yeah.
I love that one because the Giants typically, I don't know what your thoughts were there, but they typically were in the hotel, so you could stomp on one of their feet in the elevator. I don't know. But,
it was that was always like an intense one-day event, and it was nice because all the folks from New York that typically wouldn't travel to some of the other events would show up there. So I do miss that to a certain degree. But we invest a lot back into both associations. We try to volunteer as best we can, and obviously you mentioned Kiera and of course Kayla. Darren has served as the president of NIFA. I was on the board of NIFA, and even the CLFP Foundation. We are actively supporting them as well. With Mickey, our VP of Credit and Risk, is on that board. So we try to spread ourselves out and give back where we can by volunteering. But we do get a lot out of it. The content, the networking, the interaction, and just by being involved. So if there's anyone who watches this episode that's newer to the industry, I can't stress enough to get involved. And you get your name out there. It is a very altruistic industry. We just at the Orion event that you were referencing earlier, I hung out for an extra day and was in the lobby bar and ended up running into a couple of folks in the industry, and one of them has just gone through a pretty major liquidity event in their business, and rather than just staying gloating about how great they're doing, just started spouting off all the things they learned through the process to me and the other fellow. So you don't get that in other industries, and that occurred because the other two folks that were there were familiar with me as being at all these events. I was familiar with them being at all these events, and there's that, that code of trust that you're not going to violate that, but everyone's willing to give, and that comes just from the foundation of the organizations and the associations. So we look forward to seeing everybody. A lot of those events that we're going to be seeing each other at, in the next few weeks are, NIFA or Alpha related.
Sure. No, absolutely. And it keeps like the Hotel California vibe, right? I mean, it's
Yes,
a handshake. It's a handshake industry, and while I think Zoom accomplishes a lot of what we need, at the end of the day, you still want to shake hands and break bread
yes.
with.
And from what I gather, again, coming out of the pandemic restrictions, I know last year the NIFA event in Southern California drew an almost record crowd. It looks like this one is on pace to be above 400, probably is already above 400 attendees. And even folks before this call that we're having, we have a service provider that's kind of new to the industry that is going to be sending somebody out to the NIFA event. They're on the fringe of the industry, but they've taken our advice that this is something you want to be involved in. So if somebody doesn't get a hotel room, it's probably because of me, because I keep telling people to go.
I got mine, so you can yell at Joe. I didn't say anything.
Yeah, we're bunking together, aren't we, Jesse? Those aren't pillows.
Those aren't pillows, and there might be a liquid lunch that has to be involved.
Don't tell Darren.
No, he'll be third to know.
That's awesome.
Good. But I wanted to shift gears a little bit, and thank Oakmont for being in, and you guys have supported Equipment Finance Cares since we started it back in 2001. And, thank you for being on a panel last September when we had that event. What were your thoughts on just participating? Actually, you were in Minnesota too, I believe.
Correct.
Last year too. So being in two of them, listening to some of those foundation charities and talking points, what are just your overall thoughts on what we're doing?
I think what you're doing is great, because it kind of takes in the underlying nature of how we all are in the industry, and it brings us together in a non-industry conversation, but while still having that networking aspect to the events. It was great. And of course the one in Minnesota, we had a few folks from that office that don't always get out to these events, so we'd like to kind of share the experience with some of the operation folks who just don't have the opportunities that we do, traveling all over the country. And they got a lot out of it. They appreciated the conversation. And both events had great speakers. In Pennsylvania, we brought some folks that again normally don't get out to these events, so it was very convenient. You learn a lot about folks in the industry. You learn a lot about the charitable causes that whether it's Equipment Finance Care supports, or what the hosts support. And there's sometimes there's a fit, sometimes there's not. So but at least you get that exposure. And again, it's the networking. And clearly, if there's somebody who you're going to be chatting with over a cocktail or an hors d'oeuvre that has the same altruistic lean as you do, you're going to connect with them, and that connection is going to then transcend to probably business somewhere down the road. So I would say that as you have these events throughout the country, it is important for folks to get out there. And what's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to get some good food and talk to some good people, and you might find something that's very near and dear to you that's being discussed.
Yeah, and that's one of as I started the first one, I knew the different foundations and charities just from years of having customers and traveling and everything. And then as I start to go to more places, you don't realize what someone does outside of their 9 to 5. And
it's
exactly. We were joking a little bit before about like some pet insurance, right? That we heard at the executive roundtable.
Yep.
Corporate goodwill, which you guys are doing at Oakmont, goes a long way when it comes to the younger generation looking for an employer that gives back to their local communities.
And we do actually have pet insurance. I'm sure a lot of folks do through their benefits program, but we do have pet insurance as one of the options.
Wait. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I did not know.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's something that they can buy. We don't subsidize it, but it is something that you can get at a discount over where you would get it, I guess from a PetSmart or, outside of the organization. But yeah, and you can, if you work here, you can get pet insurance.
That's fantastic. I did not know that. I guess that's a question I need to start asking people to see
Yeah.
if you can get pet insurance.
It's I would think you're going to get more folks that answer yes, that it is an option on the coverage, because it's a little bit more standard now.
Until it goes down to what level of exoticness will someone insure.
We did have an employee that had an exotic pet, and I don't know if that was eligible for insurance coverage or not, but it's, we just have to make sure that you have to first make sure that your children are insured, and you can't pick your pet over your children, because there's probably a few folks that might want to do that.
That's fantastic. So, between the Phillies going to the World Series this year, the run they went on, the Eagles getting as close as they were, I got to watch the Rangers last night beat the Flyers in overtime, so at least I have a little bit of,
Yeah, well, now you're really being now you're being mean.
Hey, I'm digging because
Yeah,
that's all I got. That's all I got.
What an incredible your run that you had with two teams, while neither one was able to prevail in their respective championships. Just the vibe and everything with in the city was electric. I hate to use that word, but that's exactly what it was. The Phillies were kind of more the surprise, because you knew they had a decent team, but even through mid-August, if somebody had said that this team's headed to playing in late October, I don't think there's very many fans that would have jumped on that bandwagon. So when it happened, it was just kind of a surge of support. And it was great to watch. I was sorry that they didn't come out with a win, but I think they put up a good fight. And I would say that almost everyone in Philadelphia, including my 95-year-old mother, was glued to the screen, watching. And then the Eagles, of course, was a little bit different, because you kind of knew that they had a great team with their record going in. So it was less of a surprise that they made it to the Super Bowl. Certainly, sad that they didn't win, but it was one of those. We're chatting when we're at that event in Las Vegas earlier this week. Our Uber driver from the airport to the hotel, started talking sports, and he was like, "That was one of the best games I've watched." Like, there's so many times you're at a Super Bowl party and you just want to get up and grab a drink or something to eat, and he said that I watched that game from start to finish, and the game was better than the commercials. So you'd like at least to show up and have that sort of rapport, and you hate when the game ends kind of the way it did on it was a holding call. It was there was a hold that occurred, but you don't you don't want to be the official that your minor call ends up costing a team and the fans, but both sides. You had 2 minutes of complete boring football because of a minor infraction. And you mentioned hockey. Hockey was probably more of my sport than the others, and unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have the Flyers reaching to the Stanley Cup this year, but we've got to see that a few times in my lifetime. When all your teams have won a championship, we have to look at it as Philadelphia fans, saying, "Hey, there's a lot of teams or a lot of cities that don't have teams that have even gotten that far." So we're very fortunate and very supportive of the teams. I have my Eagles hat. I have an Eagles hat right here, hanging up my office. So.
Sure.
And a baseball bat, and probably a few other things that are sports related.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about deflating a balloon, right? In that last 2 minutes of that. I mean, I understand it. Being a Giants fan, like listening to the head ref that was on that Eli Tyree play. I mean, he could have called that play dead.
Yeah, that's true.
And what if he would have done? I mean, that would have ended that game. And it's just amazing.
there's a
humans,
holding call on every play in the NFL, and
time,
you,
time and time and place, time
time
and
and place,
place.
exactly. And going back to the hockey, where I used to be very involved in with the Flyers. I've been at games, where we've seen the head ref tell linesman, put your whistle in your pocket, that let them play. So
Hockey, you can get away with it. I don't think they're
hockey can probably get away with a little bit more, but yeah, that can be just as chippy as football. But
I don't know if the Flyers have played out here this year, but
yeah, I don't know.
if they haven't, you should come out. And next year,
Right.
if they have, next year come out, because they're playing they're playing where the Sun Devils play.
Gotcha. I want to see the Vegas venue. I've not been to where the Knights play. I've tried to, and it just has never matched up to my travel for any conventions or trade shows.
I don't even, and they wouldn't be stupid enough to have them home next week, would they? Or in 2 weeks?
I don't know, actually. With everything else going on in Vegas, I'm thinking that they probably moved the UNLV and the Golden Knights are probably away if they're smart.
I would think so, but I was also wondering why ConX is the same time as March Madness kickoff and St. Patty's Day. So that town is going to be fantastic. Fantastic.
That's a little too much for even Vegas. I think you get 160,000 people for one event and probably 100,000 for another. And
what's going on here? I ask everyone who comes on here, Joe, give a little fun fact about themselves. Anything besides what we've learned over the last 30 minutes that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a fun fact, but it's just something probably a little out there, is that of the many businesses that I've been involved in, one of them is kind of strange in that I was one of the 4 domestic manufacturers of cat litter, and so I tend to know a little bit more about the average household cat than most people. And even though I currently don't own a cat, I've had them different parts of my life, and kids have had them, but yeah, I know quite a bit about cats and their bathroom habits.
That's fantastic.
I wouldn't go with fantastic. I would go.
No, I say fantastic because Brooke has a cat issue, and
Okay.
I have an issue of telling her now. So I want to say I think we have 6.
Oh wow! Well,
so if you can come, I wish I could pay you to consult for me and tell me how much, because we fight all the time about, do we really need 3 cat litter boxes around our house? And
actually, you do. That's an important thing. Yes, you do. You should actually probably have one for each cat. So.
That's fantastic. I said it's fantastic because okay, all right. That's. And then
But
I guess
I've yet to finance anything in the cat litter industry. That would kind of be my dream, piece of equipment would be somebody in the cat litter industry who needs to finance something. And
then maybe you should, because every now, at least 3 or 4 times a year, I'll get this hey, check this out. Or she bought a cat box 4 years ago, and it's almost shipped because they were blaming the pandemic on the supply chain and everything else. And she's like, oh, I think we're lot number 4, and that means it comes out in May. And I'm kind of like, this was 5 years ago. You still haven't gotten it yet? She goes, no, I got it on the front side of it. And I'm like, how much did you pay for this thing? And
you don't want to know.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hey, micro ticket business. And then if you could layer on some pet insurance.
There you go. You're thinking now. Hey, listen, just get an old, a plastic bucket or tray and some cat. That's really all you need. That's all.
Have somebody else take care of it.
Have somebody else take care of it, or use the scoopable cat litter. That's something that we helped invent. So I guess that's my contribution to the consumer society, is I helped invent scoopable cat litter. So
fantastic.
Not so much.
I'd rather them just go out a cat door and go in the yards.
That's what our cats did. Ironically, is we had outdoor cats, so we cat litter boxes. Even though I had all the free cat litter I could handle, they were still outdoor cats.
So I guess in closing here, Joe, why do business with Oakmont Capital?
That's a great question, because it's funny with all of our competitors. Our money is just as green as everybody else's. You use it the same way. And for us, it's primarily about relationships, and we take the approach of, obviously on the technology side, we want to be high tech, but we also want to be high touch, and that it's a good business model, not just for how it looks outwardly, but how it works inwardly. In that there's some great efficiencies to how we operate. We end up having among the small ticket lenders one of the highest numbers as it relates to assets under management per employee or originations per employee. Don't ask how much, I'm not going to tell you, but it is using that approach and fostering those relationships with the manufacturers, with their dealers, with just random used equipment dealers that have no affiliation with a captive or a manufacturer. That you want to have those relationships, because people go from dealership to dealership and loyal to, they might be loyal to one brand or another, depending upon the situation. You want to be able to service as many as you can within your industry, but you also want to have those relationships. You want to, why do we go to trade shows? Why do we go to conferences? It's the same reason our dealers and our manufacturers go. They want to be able to have that face-to-face interaction. They want to be able to establish and foster relationships, and I think that's what we're really good at. Do we win them all? No, but we certainly have had substantial growth over the last 5 years by employing that approach. But you also have to, there's a lot of good, technical products out there that, service providers like, yourself and others that, have offered throughout the years. And you do have to deploy those, because some of them are really good and they really enhance the finance company's efficiencies and allow you to have those relationships.
Absolutely, Joe. Well, I really appreciate your time today, sir. I'm sure you'll be sick of me in 3 weeks anyways.
Yeah, no.
But,
well, there's always airports. We'll always have those, Jesse.
There's always be airports, and there'll always be the first class seats,
Yeah, and that's because Darren will be sitting on the third row.
Oh, that's fantastic. I can't wait to hear from him. It'll be fantastic. But
I look forward to it as well.
Thanks again, Joe, and I appreciate your time today, sir. Thank you.
You got it. Take care, Jesse.